Hi, I've just walked up the Via di Santa Bonaventura up to the facade of the Domus Augustana or Augustiana. This is the public part of the Palace of Domitian. In front of me is the Lorarium over here. And if we pan to the right, we have low walls left standing of the middle part, the basilica, and then finally at the end down to my right we see the 55-foot high remains of the first story of the so-called basilica. So this is the public part, these three rooms where you would come and be received by the emperor. Now we're panning the remains of the Lorarium, just, maybe 10 feet high of walls survives of the first story of this so-called Lorarium that may have been the sort of holding pen before you were admitted next door to the audience hall. Well, this sign, as you see, says Casa dei Griffi, House of the Griffins. We're on the backside of the Lorarium of the Domus Augustana, and the Lorarium is back this way, but notice this gated area that's leading us to the entrance staircase going down below this level to the House of the Griffins, a Republican house from around 100 BC. So we're panning across the so-called no man's land that now actually started to be studied and excavated, as you can see, and as we pan across that, we come to the exterior wall of the Lorarium. And then if we continue panning around, we start seeing behind the Lorarium the public banquet areas, and then finally the Villa Mills, which houses the Museum of the Palatine. Behind me is the audience hall, and you can see the walls, even from what remains, were heavily articulated with all kinds of piers that were capped with pilasters. And then if we look behind, we're in the throne area. Perhaps at the end of the main axis, the emperor would have sat on a throne here and received people as they came to petition him or talk to him. Behind the audience hall is this big courtyard, as you can see, with a garden and fountain in the middle of it. And as we pan around down the end of the main axis, beyond it we see the Banquet Hall. We'll get a closer look at that later. Here we are in the banquet area of the palace, behind courtyard number 1, to the south, that is to say, courtyard number 1. And if we pan around, we can see that the floor is lifted by a suspensori system. That was actually put in after Domitian by Hadrian in order to heat the room. So it could be used all year round. And just to the west, off of the banquet hall, behind us is this Elliptical Nymphaeum. So this is to be imagined as a fountain with jet d'eau and perhaps decorated with statues, surrounded by an opus sectile pavement with giallo antico columns that are fluted. Here we can see that lying all over the site are remains of architectonic elements in white marble, heavily carved. We associate the Flavian style of architectonic decoration as being characterized by very heavy carving. And of course all we see left today is the brick fabric of the walls, but these have to be imagined as all being covered by marble orthostats. And you can see heavy use of marble of all kinds in the palace. Just over here, we have the remains of a cut marble and opus sectile floor using Pavonazzetto marble. You can recognize the Pavonazzetto because it's basically white with a black veining. And we've stopped in order to just point out some coccio which is a waterproofing finish on the brick. And then on top of that, the Romans set in the orthostats of opus sectile. In this case, it's a white marble, which only fragments remain. So as the sign in front of me says, we're looking, we have in front of us some very nice opus sectile pavement left of Nero's Domus Transitoria, which is just immediately abutting to the west the Elliptical Nymphaeum of Domitian's palace. And as you can see, it's at a lower level. So this is a good area to come to kind of sum up the public part of the Domus Augustana. Behind me you can see the Lorarium, Audience Hall, and the Basilica. And then behind that is Courtyard 1, which is a nice green area, a nice garden, a transitional area. And then beyond that to the left, that is to say to the south, the heated Banquet Hall. Of course the heat would be turned off in warm weather. So this is the public part, the negotium part of the palace with the adjacent otium part for banquets. We're standing still in the upper level, but on the southern part of the site, that is behind the public part of the audience hall, the courtyard number 1, the banquet hall, where we can look down at the private part of the palace, the residential part, with grand, very high rooms where the emperor and his family would have lived in apartments off of this wonderful sunken courtyard dominated in the center by a fountain, which some remains survive, that has a design based on the pelta, or the shield typically associated with Amazons. And they go all the way around the fountain. And beyond this private area, that is to say beyond this garden to the south, is the bridge connecting the imperial residence to the imperial box in the Circus Maximus, because that is what is below us, is the Circus Maximus. Now also at this lower level and connected to the residence is the Hippodrome Garden. So this is a garden in the shape of a racetrack. Of course, it wasn't really a racetrack, it was a garden. And off of it were places to dine and banquet. But probably this was for the emperor, his family, and their private invited guests, not so much for the public. Beyond the Hippodrome Garden are the baths. Okay. We're up in the walkway above the Hippodrome, between the Hippodrome Garden and the Imperial Residence sunk below me. And what we can see is that there's pavement here in Serpentino and other marbles, but an opus sectile pavement with a really nice example of Serpentino. We're still in the walkway above the Hippodrome Garden with the Imperial Residence that way to the south, and we have more Serpentino from the pavement that's left. And then if you'll follow me, you can see behind me, up against this very well preserved brick wall, brick-faced wall, we have some opus spicatum. So we can see that here too, as we are accustomed to observe, the pavement of an area could tell us who was using it, and the opus spicatum made out of bricks is for the slaves and lower class people to use.